Today we want to focus on the life of Stalin, from the Revolution of 1905 to the Second Revolution of 1917. The Russian Revolution of 1905 would lead to the government reforms in the form of a Duma, or parliament, a multi-party political system, and a constitution that would go into effect in 1906. It was also the 1905 revolution that would lead to two revolutions in 1917. It was also the revolution that led to the emergence of Vladimir Lenin's Bolshevik Party becoming a political movement in Russia. Stalin's homeland of Georgia was hit hard with the 1905 revolution. At the time, Stalin was living in Baku by the Caspian Sea, which had become part of Russia's empire in 1813 after the Russo-Persian War that had lasted 9 years. Ethnic violence had broken out between the Armenians and the Azeris. Stalin spoke out about the violence, blaming the Emperor Nicholas II of programs against Jews and Armenians to shore up his position as emperor. As was typical of Stalin at the time, he was stealing items, in this case, printing equipment. To bolster his political beliefs, he would form a group in the name of the Bolsheviks to keep the warring parties in Baku apart. He would later form the same kinds of groups in his native Georgia. The opposition was doing the same, creating battle squads in an effort to further their political ideologies. Stalin's groups were notorious for doing illegal activities to fund their goals, disarming police, military troops, raiding government arsenals, and protection rackets. The latter would raise funds for the continuing of Stalin's enterprises.
In November 1905, Stalin was elected to be one of the representatives at the Bolshevik conference in St. Petersburg. The conference was moved to a location in Finland. It was here that Stalin met Lenin for the first time. Stalin disagreed with Lenin on one point, electing representatives to the Duma. Although Stalin idolized Lenin, he saw elections as a waste of time. In April 1906, another conference was held, this time in Stockholm, Sweden. The major difference was that it was a complete meeting of the entire Russian Social Democratic Labor Party. This group was led by the Mensheviks, who were in the majority. Menshevik in Russian means minority. The RSDLP was mostly in favor at the end of illegal means to fund themselves. Stalin and Lenin were not of that opinion and met to find ways to continue things like bank robbery to further the Bolshevik goal. Stalin would take time in July 1906 to get married to Kato Svadnidze. 9 months later, his son, Yakov, was born. In November 1907, his wife would die of typhus. In June 1907, Stalin would lead a bank robbery that would ultimately kill 40 people, but none of his group. The Mensheviks were upset at the robbery, throwing Stalin out of the RSDLP. He didn't care. He went on to take the Georgian RSDLP into the Bolshevik majority. He continued his illegal activities, to which he added kidnapping for ransom of wealthy parents and counterfeiting Russian currency. Stalin found himself arrested again in March 1908, where he was imprisoned at Belov prison in Baku. Here, he would lead the other Bolsheviks imprisoned there in all things, including killing those he suspected of being informers. Shortly after, Stalin found himself being exiled to the east, ending up in Sovietgost in the Vologda province. Here, he arrived in February 1909.
His exile didn't last long, as he escaped in June to return to St. Petersburg. His freedom lasted until March 1910, when he was arrested again and sent back into exile. In June 1911, he was given permission to move to Vologda. This was after the birth of his son, Konstantin. The result of an affair with his laundry lady, he remained in Vologda for 2 months, when he escaped again to St. Petersburg, arrested again in September. His 2-year exile was extended for 5 years. January 12th saw the meeting of the first Bolshevik Central Committee in Prague. Lenin and Grigory made it a point to add Stalin as a member of the Central Committee, a role he would have for the rest of his life. This was while Stalin was in exile in Vologda. Stalin again escaped exile, returning to St. Petersburg. This time, he would be a secret editor of a Bolshevik newspaper, Star. It was a weekly newspaper. Stalin saw it changed to a daily newspaper, renamed Truth. Then Stalin found himself arrested again, May 1912. This time he was exiled in July 1912, this time to a Siberian town. Here he was the roommate of another Bolshevik. Within 2 months, the two roommates were back in St. Petersburg, having once again escaped exile, on a trip to Tiflis. Stalin planned a robbery of a mail coach. All of the gang except Stalin was arrested. Stalin went back to St. Petersburg to work on his newspaper.
The October 1912 election saw 12 members of the Marxist factions, 6 Bolshevik and 6 Menshevik, elected to the Duma. Stalin used this as a reason to try and get the two sides to work together, which is not what Lenin wanted. It was said that Lenin believed that there were 2 ways for things to go, his way or the wrong way, and things weren't good if you did things the wrong way according to Lenin. Stalin would meet Lenin in Krakow in late 1912, where he was convinced that Lenin's way on non-reconciliation was the path that should be followed. Stalin was again arrested in St. Petersburg in February 1913 and sentenced to 4 years of exile in Turkhansk, this remote part of Siberia and very hard to escape from. In August, he arrived in Monastyrskoye and 4 weeks later was moved to Kostina. Convinced that he would escape again, authorities moved Stalin even further to Korolyka, near the Arctic Circle. He had an affair with an underage girl who gave birth to a child that soon died. 2.5 years later, she gave birth to another child, a son, Alexander.
While World War I was raging in Europe, most exiled Bolsheviks were conscripted to serve in the Russian army in October of 1916. The prisoners were taken west, where in early February of 1917, they were given medical exams. Due to his crippled arm, Stalin was declared unfit and sent back to serve the remainder of his exile. This lasted until February 1917 revolution later that month. The emperor had abdicated and the provisional government wasn't as keen to keep track of political exiles. In March, he was back on his way to Petrograd, the former St. Petersburg. Upon arrival, he rejoined the editorship of Pravda. Due to his standing in the party at this point, Stalin came in behind both Lenin and Zinovnikov in election to the new Central Committee. He found himself elected to the Executive Committee of the Petrograd Soviet, the Council of Petrograd's Workers. After an uprising in July, the provisional government ordered a crackdown on Bolshevik supporters. This included a raid on the offices of Petrograd. Stalin smuggled Lenin out to safety and then essentially became leader of the Bolsheviks in Lenin's absence. At the Sixth Party Congress, Lenin called for the overthrow of the provisional government in a coup. On 10th October 1917, Stalin had secured a majority of support in the party for the coup.
That would lead directly to the October Revolution of 1917 and the rise of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union to control the world's largest country by land area. Tune in next week when we cover the Russian October Revolution and the Russian Civil War that followed in Stalin, Part 3.
I've been Robert Knowles. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. And also, if you want to support this channel, please take a look in the description, and you will find Richard's store and my PayPal. Thanks all.
And I am Richard Simpson. Thank you, and good night.